What's going on, y'all? So here we have a video of Zona Tech, who is doing a PS5 Pro 1 month, though it's actually 1.5 months because he had it since day one, review later. And he's going to give you an analysis and then give you a end conclusion on whether he thinks it's worth getting a Pro or not. And the stuff that he shows is mostly PlayStation 5 first party games. He'll show Diablo or whatever, but I wish he would have showed other games that had more issues. But even then, after showing all this, he's not really convinced that he needs, and not just him, he's not convinced that anyone really needs to upgrade the PS5 Pro over the PlayStation 5, as it's not a major difference. And not only that, when he's doing reviews, in order to show like any sort of difference that there should be, you have to kind of zoom in and pay attention to that. But people who get on games today, they're not going to be able to do that. You have to make a video to do that. They're just going to play the game. So we're not seeing no huge jump here because obviously the PS5 Pro is more like a just an overclocked enhanced version of the PlayStation 5, and most people are not graphics whores. They're just looking to play the game with good performance, and if they have the good performance and it looks good enough, like most games today, they're going to be okay with that. And the price tag also, as he says, and I've been saying, is not justifiable. And they'll try to highlight that the biggest improvement that he thinks is the 2 TB, but not everybody plays that many games to fill the whole thing up with 2 TB. That's a double-edged sword, you know what I mean? Some people, only play something like Call of Duty, or have Fortnite, or maybe some just free-to-play games on there, and maybe one or two other games, and that's good enough. And it's not like you can delete it if you have fast internet and re-download. And that's just optional. Like, here's my thing. I think that for that console, what they should have did instead of enforcing the 2 TB hard drive on you is gave you a better CPU, because you can't change that out. See, that's not really something really to argue against, right? Who would not want the better CPU because it's CPU limited? Whereas you could go get the terabyte later on down the line. You can get a hard disk drive later on down the line. You know what I mean? Those are things you have the power to swap around, but the CPU you don't. So let's get into what he's going to say. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what y'all think. As I said again, I'm always balancing the spectrum and giving people a more realistic view on whether you should get the Pro or not. And people have seen me be very critical against the toxic fan base and against the systems on why these things should not be happening. And they just can't handle reality because they just want to see only positivity towards it. And it's like, that's not the case, though. We need to see the balance here. But yeah, ponies, relax. You can go ahead and ride on over here if you want. But people who are on the fence and just want to, get it and just enjoy it, I can understand that. But honestly, I don't think it's that much better than the Series X, and the Series X has a better CPU. So let's get into this.
I've been extensively testing out the PS5 Pro for about a month and a half now to answer the ultimate question: is the PS5 Pro worth buying if you've already got a PS5? Well, during my testing, I've discovered 4 ways in which the PS5 Pro visibly improves over the PS5. And those are in gaming experience, storage, ports, and body. But before we continue, a quick shout out to Bid
My body is ready.
Defender for their free AI-powered Scamio service.
Let's go ahead and go
the
past
best way
that.
any specific PS5 Pro did not get a clear PS5 Pro patch, and games that did get a clear PS5 Pro patch. So let me start with the first one: games that did not get a clear PS5 Pro patch. And by this I mean games that did get a PS5 Pro patch, but that patch did not introduce any specific PS5 Pro graphical modes. And the first of those games is Diablo IV. In the character selection screen, you can see that for the Necromancer background, the PS5 Pro has more rendering distance, as it can display things like the skeletons on the left here. If we look at
See, but nobody's going to do that. You want to see a clear difference while you're playing the game. All that type of stuff, to me, is like, nobody's going to be able to do that on a console. You can't say, let me zoom in and look at this right. You're not going to do that.
my Sorcerer, the PS5 Pro shows the reflections of the candles in the ground, which are missing from the PS5. And if we look at my Spiritborn, we can see how the foliage in the background is ever so slightly sharper. When it comes to the actual gameplay, the PS5 Pro seems to run at a slightly higher resolution. We can see that the ground texture is clear on the PS5 Pro compared to the standard PS5. Same thing here inside the Alchemist building if we look at the hay on the ground. Or here, when we go up the stairs, where we can see that the shadow on the building to the left is improved on the PS5 Pro. These differences are small indeed. However, when I was playing the game and actually moving around, I was able to perceive this extra sharpness on the PS5 Pro right away. Which brings me to the next game that got no visible new graphic mode, and that is Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And here, the differences were much bigger. When we compare the default 4K 60Hz modes, the PS5 Pro is significantly sharper, as you can see from these fine topographic lines on the map. This extra sharpness is especially noticeable when you take a look at the documents here, which are almost readable on the PS5 Pro, whereas on the PS5 these are quite blurry. However, the biggest difference is when playing in the 120Hz mode. The PS5 cannot run this in 4K, instead it runs it at close to 1440p. The PS5 Pro, however, is able to run this at a much higher resolution. Our capture card unfortunately cannot capture 4K 120, so we have to record this using our camera, and unfortunately, it is really hard to tell the difference from the footage. But what I can say is that playing in the 120Hz mode on the PS5 Pro, it didn't feel like I was getting any resolution downgrade compared to playing it in 4K 60. Unlike the base PS5. However, the PS5 Pro did have some artifacting, likely caused by the PS5 Pro's new image upscaling technique, which is PSSR. This was mostly visible in cloth simulations.
And I was telling a lot of people about this, that this is a PSSR issue. We're going to keep watching, and we're going to see if this also shows up on Spider-Man and in other first-party games. It's not a third-party issue as people were thinking. And the devs at Activision said that it's a PSSR issue because most upscaling and systems that use anti-aliasing reduces the white noise, but the PSSR is designed to not do that, so they would have to go and change that on their end, and that's going to take some time. That's not easy to deal with.
That had this very visible noise, and I've actually noticed this in a few other games as well. More on that later. And this brings me to games that did get a very clear PS5 Pro
to tell you about that.
The first of which is God of War Ragnarök. If we go into the settings menu, we can now see a PS5 Pro enhanced mode that seems to push 60 FPS at a higher resolution compared to the base PS5 thanks to PSSR upscaling. If we take a look at the bush here, right behind here, it is significantly higher res on the PS5 Pro, and same goes for the rock behind. This is also noticeably sharper on the Pro. Same goes here if we take a look at Kratos' armor. The writing on it looks noticeably sharper on the PS5 Pro. Will you actually notice these improvements when you're in a fighting scene? Probably not.
No.
However, in scenes where you're standing still to admire the artwork, you might. Which brings me to Horizon Forbidden West, where the improvements are much more visible. So we've got two new PS5 Pro graphical modes. Favor Performance, which runs the PS5's High Fidelity mode, a 30 FPS mode at 60 FPS, and then Favor Resolution Pro, which actually runs at 30 FPS but pushes the graphics even further. Now, I did find the existence of such mode to go against the entire idea that Sony was pushing for the PS5 Pro, that it's meant to be a console that combines the performance and the quality modes into one single 4K 60 mode without any compromises. Okay, so let's first talk about the performance mode on both consoles. The PS5 Pro definitely looks sharper, which we can see if we take a look at a ground texture. And even the shadows are improved if you take a look at where the campfire is.
I would hope so.
Then the drawing distance is also improved. The bottom left area here is not only noticeably sharper on the PS5 Pro, but we can also see those two extra bushes.
Nobody's going to care about
that are completely missing from the base PS5. So what about the resolution mode? Well, in terms of the overall sharpness, they both look identical here, but where I think the PS5 Pro shines is when it comes to its shadows that seem to be more defined, and they do look a bit more realistic on the PS5 Pro. But other than that, I haven't really noticed any other advantages to this new 30 FPS resolution mode on the PS5 Pro. So really, the main advantage of the PS5 Pro here is that new Performance Pro mode, which
that's what people care about anyways, but you see what he's saying. You're not seeing like, oh my god, this is so mind-blowing, I need to get it. It just seems kind of unnecessary for the most part. And if people want to get it, you know, go ahead. If you got the money and it costs you nothing, go ahead. You know what I mean? But this is more like talking to the whole entire spectrum and to the whole entire world. You know, definitely if you own a PS5 already, or if you had a Series X and you just wanted to get one for games on there only, if you didn't have a PC or vice versa, you know what I mean? If you're just a gamer wanting to just game, I mean, I don't really see the difference here compared to when they launched the PS4 Pro. That was a lot better deal. It's just stuff where you have to zoom in and get it magnetized. Like, why do I have to do all that, man? Why can't you just show me that clearly?
In gameplay, you'll definitely be able to notice that extra sharpness. And this brings me to Last of Us Part 1 Remastered. This now has a Pro performance mode that still renders the game at 1440p 60 FPS.
This old ass game, like I'm kind of tired of seeing. I mean, it's like the game is so old. It definitely looked better because it had lower settings back then. So that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because it's like this is what you have to show for the best thing to look better. Show me some new games. You know what I mean? Because
And still
not
upscales
him,
it to
but
4K,
just it's
but
kind of
now
like
uses PSSR, so
played
the
out.
upscaling result should be much closer to native 4K. And to my surprise, this was actually the game that had the biggest difference, despite there being almost no difference from the official Sony footage. Both consoles are set to their 60 FPS modes, yet the PS5 Pro is significantly higher res. You can see this in Ellie's backpack, Joel's hair, and especially the background, which looks like 1080p on the base PS5 as opposed to 4K on the PS5 Pro. Or here, where Joel is walking towards the building, the resolution of the foliage and everything really is much higher on the PS5 Pro. So indeed, playing this game on the PS5 Pro is a significantly better experience than on the base PS5. However, the most unexpected thing to me was when I had a look at the PS5 Pro in Pro mode versus the PS5 in its 30 FPS quality mode, as the PS5 Pro actually looked sharper, even though they're both meant to be 4K. If we take a look at the background, you can see that a door is higher res on the PS5 Pro, or even those documents on the left-hand side, those are also sharper on the PS5 Pro. And of course, the PS5 Pro runs at 60 as opposed to 30 on the base.
See, by playing that, you could see that because you're just playing the game and it looks better. That's what matters because that's the experience that you're going to be moving and playing and all this other zooming in and all that. I mean, it is cool to show the difference. I'm definitely against that. But if that is their best way to show improvements on like all these other games, because it's just Last of Us, you know what I mean? The settings were already so low. If you take a look at it, because they don't show you the slider settings. So with the promo, they actually turned all that up and put the PSSR over it. But if this is all you have to show, just this game, as a major improvement, then it's not really saying much.
PS5.
There's so many
Okay,
PSSR
so
issues.
here I mentioned Bitdefender's Scameo service.
All right, we're gonna skip past this.
AI-powered. What's a scam and what isn't? Well, you can test Scameo below. And the last game that I tested was Spider-Man 2. On the PS5 Pro, there are two Pro modes here as well. Performance Pro, which has the same quality as Fidelity mode on the PS5, but uses PSSR to run at 60 as opposed to 30. And then Fidelity Pro mode, which is a 30 FPS mode which has some additional ray tracing features that you could also manually adjust to get about 40 to 50 FPS here. Starting off with performance mode on both, the PS5 Pro is definitely higher res. If we zoom into some of the buildings, you'll be able to see that the standard PS5 has this weird noise, whereas the PS5 Pro is much cleaner. The bigger difference is over here if we take a look at the trees in the background. You can see that the base PS5 is heavily sharpened, whereas the PS5 Pro is significantly clearer, showing us that PSSR is indeed a superior upscaling technique compared to the dynamic resolution, which is what the PS5 was using. We can also see the greater traffic density on the PS5 Pro compared to the PS5. And of course, we do get all of those ray tracing capabilities of the 30 FPS fidelity mode on the PS5, only at 60 FPS on the PS5 Pro. The only downside is that I have noticed some PSSR artifacting here as well, just like I did in Black Ops 6.
You see what I mean? There it is again in another first-party game. I was trying to tell people this is a PSSR issue. And they were thinking that it was something specifically third-party. I'm like, no, there it is again. It's Sony's system. Point blank, period. Anybody that argues against that is being a moron. It's just being ignorant at this point. Because I've already showed 12 games. Now that Spider-Man has it, that's number 13. That I think about it, I was like, okay, I didn't know Spider-Man had that. He just showed me something new.
If we take a look at the window here, you can probably see that flickering. Or in this building in the far distance, you can see it here as well. So what about that Fidelity Pro mode? Well, if we compare the reflections, they are not only higher res on the PS5 Pro, the reflections in the buildings in the distance seem to be much smoother, whereas on the PS5, they are quite sharp. Although the footage itself, interesting enough, does actually look lower res on the PS5 Pro, which is odd to me. Maybe the PS5 Pro is pushing its ray tracing so hard here that PSSR had to lower the resolution below 4K.
That's what happens. Ray tracing is overrated. That's why a lot of these people saying, oh, ray tracing, RDNA 3 and 4. It's like, dude, you're going to be playing at 30 frames per second. Having it like, nobody wants that. It, like Mark Sony said, 75% of the community wants performance increase. They don't want to be stuck at 30 frames per second to look at reflections that they have to pay attention to, which is, you know what I mean, kind of like irrelevant compared to everything else being improved. It's overrated right now, and it needs to be improved. And on PC, you get full path ray tracing. This is limited.
Although you could also argue that the PS5 Pro has more natural depth of field, whereas the PS5 simply oversharpens everything, hence the perceived clearer image on the base PS5. So just like in Horizon Forbidden West, the best graphical mode here is once again that 60 FPS mode, which thanks to PSSR is definitely sharper on the PS5 Pro. Now, before I give you the conclusion on whether or not it's worth buying the PS5 Pro, there are 3 other improvements that you get that are non-gaming related, which I do want to mention. Now, the first non-gaming improvement is the storage. The PS5 Pro comes with 2 terabytes of storage by default.
See, that's my thing. Like, this is a double-edged sword. Some people don't need that. That's why I feel like they enforced that to jack up the price. And then took out the disk drive. And, you know what I mean? If you include the disk drive, the $700 price tag would have been more applicable because it's another double-edged sword. What you're saying is that, no, I think most of you don't need this because I see a lot of people are digital. And then you're saying, I think most people need this. Honestly, they're kind of like no difference. I would have said, no, 1 terabyte, and improve that CPU a little bit instead. Mistake on their end.
As opposed to just $825 on the original PS5 or 1 terabyte on the PS5 Slim. And that's actually huge. On my PS5, I had to install a 2 terabyte M.2 in order to fit all of my games. However, on the PS5 Pro, next improvement is when it comes to the ports. The front USB-A port has now been replaced by USB Type-C, which is so it's convenient, or buy an entirely new long USB. So sometimes I need to unplug and replug that dongle, which was far easier to do, which is far smaller and far lighter.
And this, he's just talking about the cover. So let's get to what he's going to conclude.
I thought.
We already know that.
My PS5 Pro was the original model with a disk drive, which means that it is actually the biggest and heaviest PS5 ever made in the box. So you'll have to pay another $30 for it. So by default, worth buying a PS5 Pro if you already have a PS5. Well, for the most part, I would actually say no. And that's because the PS5 Pro costs $700. And if you also need a disk drive, then guess what? Scalpers have bought all of them, so you'll need to spend another $150 or so.
Hell no.
And if you also need a vertical stand as well, then that no longer comes in the box, so you'll have to pay another $30 for it. So by the time you've bought everything that the original PS5 came with, you'd be paying close to $900 for the PS5 Pro. Now, you do get way more storage, which I think is worth noting, as that is worth about $100 alone. And while in some games like Last of Us, Horizon Forbidden West, and Spider-Man, you can actually see a very substantial difference, in other games like Diablo IV or God of War Ragnarök, the improvements are more minimal. So the main people who I would recommend a PS5 Pro to are serious gamers who already have a high-end 4K TV or monitor that's OLED and also has a high refresh rate. And you also want to play games in 4K 60 or even 4K 120, as in that case, you will definitely notice a difference, like in Black Ops 6.
Or if you don't have one and instead of spending 500 then 700, you could just go spend the 700 and get that. Other than that, no, you know what I mean? If you already have the PS5, I don't really see the point. Like I said, if you got the money, it's no problem. You want to trade it in at GameStop and get credit for that, or sell it and go get one, whatever. Yeah, that makes sense. But other than that, you kind of get the point of what he's saying. No, I've said no. A lot of other people have too, but I'm not going to tell somebody what to buy and what not to buy. He's just saying, does he recommend it? And a lot of people are saying this because it just feels unnecessary compared to the Pro. So there we have it, y'all. Another video to give y'all some highlights here. He didn't say anything rude or toxic. He's just being honest, and he's doing games where it's like, this is obviously going to be improved. He didn't show a lot of other games that I thought he should have shown, because a lot of people are playing third-party games on PlayStation. Most people, they get a PlayStation just like an Xbox or whatever. Now it's different for Xbox, actually, because of Game Pass. But I'm saying prior to, like, you know, decades before, you're getting it to play mostly third-party games, because otherwise it's just movie rush games. They ain't going to last you. No, you're trying to play games you could play a lot. And honestly, if you think about that, yeah, it's having too many issues. So I'd say wait. Now, GTA 6, that's different. You know what I mean? I can understand that. But other than that, yeah, there we have it. All right, y'all. Peace out. Have a good day. Ponies, relax.